I'll do my best.
Your best? Losers always whine about their best. Winners go home and the prom queen.
Welcome to the best soccer show. The best soccer show in the whole world.
Here we go. It's the best soccer show, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Jason Davis and Jared Dubois live Wednesday evening episode. We are here. We are here to talk national team. 2 days away, Jared. 2 days away from Costa Rica.
And it's a cluster.
Things are happening around this team, let me tell you. As everybody knows, the lead story has to be Brian Strauss dropping a bomb of a story at the Sporting News website, talking about disgruntled players, anonymous sources, divisions in the locker room.
It's like Watergate for U.S. national team.
It is pretty heavy stuff.
Who's Deep Throat?
There's 11 players that constitute Deep Throat, apparently, for this situation. Brian Strauss spoke to 22 people, 11 of them players. None of it is rosy. There are a couple of spots in there, Jared, where somebody said, you know what, everybody, sometimes people aren't happy when a new coach comes in and changes things. It's been 20 months. Let's just say that. It's been a year and a half. It's been a long time here. It's not like Jurgen Klinsmann showed up yesterday and changed a bunch of stuff and people aren't happy. It should be fine by now, and it's not, and it's got everybody worried. And
I think it's important what you say there. When you say fine, I think you're right. It shouldn't be perfect. It should be fine. It should be decent.
It should be something. It should be something beyond this. At least that's what that's the impression everybody gets from reading.
It's funny when we do 2 shows a week. So a lot of times, and we cover the U.S. national team a lot. So a lot of times, sometimes I feel like, we're going too far and we're too negative on this. We're thinking too much about it. Then a piece like this comes along and confirms so much of what I felt inside was really going on behind the scenes. You're like, you know what? Dang, we're actually kind of on point here.
Yeah, look, we're going to have Grant Wahl later in the show, second segment, to talk about these issues and get his impressions of what's going on in Jurgen Klinsmann's team. We've got our phone lines open to get your opinion on this. I'm sure there's a big fan reaction out there. 201-430-2378 is the phone number. 201-430-BEST is how that works. Do people still have numbers? You still have numbers, like letters on your phone, right?
You know, it's funny. Like my PIN number for my bank account is a word. But sometimes there's keys and they don't have the letters, and I have to really think about what my PIN number is because I have no idea what the actual numbers are.
Now we all have to guess. Jared,
it's cardigan.
Yeah, it's Bosco. Look, we know we have opinions out there. Are you worried about this? Does this concern you as much as it would? Is it as bad as it looks? I guess is the question, Jared.
I think it is as bad as it looks. The only problem is, depending on your perspective, how bad does it look? The biggest thing I leave coming out of this is, first of all, I'm kind of glad that maybe Jurgen Klinsmann got a window into the psyche of his players that maybe he didn't have. If there's anything I got out of this, he doesn't have a good finger on the pulse of his team.
But doesn't that indicate dysfunction right there? If Jurgen Klinsmann doesn't know,
but
to Brian Strauss and telling him, doesn't that? I mean, come on.
Absolutely. But if this is a meta experience for him, if this is an out of body experience for him, maybe he gets a little bit of clarity as to, ooh, wow, this is what's really going on. This is what I'm creating. It's not what he thought. But the other part of me is that I think he may be so detached and his theology about how he wants to approach this team that he may not even deal with this. I could see him not even dealing with this.
His theology, yes. His theology is out of whack. My issue, and there were quotes from Jurgen Klinsmann and Brian's story as well. Let's not act like he was a disenfranchised party here. He responded to some of the things that Brian Strauss was told by these anonymous players, and Jurgen Klinsmann's attitude seemed to be, that's pretty much what we're doing. We're taking these guys outside of their comfort zone. We're challenging them to do this thing. We're challenging them to do that thing. The problem for us as fans, and the problem for the prospects of this team getting to Brazil next year, is that all of those challenges may prevent you from winning the games you need to win. That's what the issue is.
But that speaks back to what his, I don't want to say, I don't know, just the way he seemed to be. Like, I think you're right. He's like, yep, that's the way it is. I kind of, and he makes it almost sound like I intentionally make it this way.
Right.
Because it comes off like that, it makes me wonder if at practice today or yesterday afternoon, he didn't even deal with this because it's just like they need to deal with it on their own. I'm doing this, and they need to either get on board or be left behind.
He's the mama bird, and he's pushed them all out of the freaking nest, and they're falling rapidly to the ground, and he's not going to go swoop down to save them. He's just going to let them fall, and if they fly, hooray!
Because that's how world football is. You either sink or swim.
That's how the United States is going to become something else and take it to the next level. Area code 201. Who's this?
This is Daniel.
What's up, Daniel?
I have a question. How confident are you that the national team is going to make it to Brazil, especially since the lineups keep changing so much?
Look, that's the other thing. 24 games, 24 lineups, Jared. The man does not know how to put out the same 11 from game to game. Now, look, in this situation, with Costa Rica and Mexico coming up, his hands are tied. He's got a lot of injuries. And some of those I'm a little doubtful about, by the way. A couple of those German guys were reported fine on the weekend. All of a sudden, they're out. But he doesn't have a consistent lineup, and this issue pops up. How confident am I, Daniel? I'm still 95% confident that they're going to make it to Brazil.
I think that I agree with you. I think they're going to make it. And my only question is, are they going to make it without playing a playoff game against New Zealand? That's like, those are two different things. They'll make it. Now, how sure are you if they'll make it in the top four? If the result, a big part of it is Costa Rica on Friday. If they get the result in Costa Rica, boom, all of a sudden I'm cool. I'm cool because that means the national team's going to have 3 months to get guys healthy and figure out and get all their best players back in, which including could be Landon Donovan. So by June, I think a lot of these problems solve themselves. Injuries, getting your best players on the field. So if they can just win Friday, I'm very, very confident that they'll make this. They'll make this qualifying stretch.
Thanks for the call, Daniel. Got to move on. Got more people coming in. Area code 310. Who's this?
Hi, this is Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan, turn down the best soccer show in the background there, so we don't have.
Oh, really? My bad.
No problem. What's up?
Well, I'm just a little confused what Jurgen is doing, to be honest. Like, I kind of, it's honestly like just confusing because I feel like we've been in this experimentation process ever since he's been coach, and it's been 24 games, 24 different lineups. I'm just waiting for some consistency, and we're not seeing it at all.
I mean, that's the thing, right? And he's not consistent with his lineup. He's not consistent with his approach. He's not consistently giving them a game plan. Did he ever? Has he? Here's what I want to know, Jared. This story talks specifically about Honduras, okay? But has he ever given them a game plan? Did they go out and beat Italy with no game plan? Did they go to Mexico and win with no game plan? Did they salvage?
Makes you wonder that if the players he talked to were involved in those games. Were the players he talked to the guys that have been playing most recently, maybe Camp Cupcake and Honduras? We don't know what segment of that Brian Strauss pulled in this. I mean, I absolutely believe in the data that Brian Strauss came to on this. I believe it's accurate. But because we don't have the identity of these people, we don't know to what extent they were involved in the program at all. Are they not involved at a level where maybe they participate in some of these higher level tactical discussions if they're not a starter on the day or anything like that? There's some things that are going to remain a mystery in this because it comes to us anonymously. But either way, I agree with the caller that when you talk about consistency, even it comes down to formations. The formations aren't even consistent because at certain points it's a 4-4-2 when they got to get a result. If you think about it, the best results that Jurgen Klinsmann has gotten, Italy, the big games that they've won have been in 4-4-2s, playing Bob Bradley style ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, are you confident about Friday? Let me ask you that.
Well, to be honest, I am pretty confident about Friday. I mean, I think it's a game we can take and we will take, to be honest. I'm just a little concerned for the future and what we have going forward. I know the injuries will settle out. It's a little confusing, injury situations, because I thought all the guys were healthy, but now I guess they're injured. So it's a little confusing with that. But, I mean, I think we'll be able to take the result on Friday and hopefully move forward and finally settle things down.
That's what everybody else. Thanks for the call. And look, Mexico, I think everybody is kind of, chalking that game up as what we usually expect when we go to Mexico. I mean, this is to remind me here, Jared, when the United States went to Azteca in 2009, was there a buzz about the chance of winning that game?
I think it was really built up that year. If you remember correctly, that was I think coming out of the Confederations Cup. I remember Charlie Davies was a big part of this team at that point. Right. He got the goal down there. I think there was a lot of momentum going into that game that this could be the time. I remember a lot of the buildup that ESPN did. This could be the time. I don't think you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of build-up because ESPN's really putting a lot of production value behind the game, which is great. But I don't think that the storyline is nearly the same confident one that it was going into 2009.
No, certainly not. I mean, there's a lot of questions around this team. Let's talk about those injuries briefly before we get to surprise choice for captain. We're going to have to talk about that. But the injuries that hit this team when Jurgen Klinsmann was making this roster selection, and you and I have not been together. We haven't talked since that roster came out. I don't know that it's worth going down, and everybody knows it at this point. But Justin Morrow and Tony Beltran on this roster because Steve Cherundolo is hurt, and Fabian Johnson is hurt, and Timmy Chandler is hurt, supposedly hurt. Again, reports out of Germany on the weekend, both Timmy Chandler and Fabian Johnson seemed to be okay. Weren't carrying knocks when they came out of games, when they left the pitch.
I'm telling you, Nuremberg has it in for U.S. soccer. I mean, that club is giving Jurgen Klinsmann and the U.S. soccer program fits. It seems like every time it's convenient for them, this one more example that Timothy Chandler all of a sudden can't go, or Timothy Chandler has some kind of knock that keeps him out of the game. Maybe it's not Timothy Chandler because, hey, listen, he's cap tied now. That was what we thought was the big avoidance. Tied. He's cap tied down. There's nothing he can do about it. But these things still persist, and it makes you wonder: do these clubs in Germany? They're used to their guys playing locally when it comes to national games. They're the German guys. They play in Germany, and their national team games are somewhere in Europe. These German teams, I wonder if they don't want their guys traveling.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, maybe that's the case. I get the feeling that, okay, yeah, Timmy Chandler is cap tied now, and we've got that saga behind us. But if push came to shove and Nuremberg said, we kind of need you to stay here, he's the kind of guy that's going to say, sure, why not? It's a game, it's a couple of games in the other side of the world, basically. I don't really feel like going right now or whatever it is. I mean, I am not at all convinced in the fullbacks that are brought in for this team. I think Tony Beltran and Justin Morrow. I mean, if you look at it, was Justin Morrow or Tony Beltran, were they in your ASN 100? I think I had Beltran somewhere like 85 to 90, somewhere in that range. Beltran is down there, yeah.
It's a good ways down there. So it makes me wonder if you're Jurgen Klinsmann on Friday, is Jeff Cameron a fullback?
Probably. I think that's probably where we're headed. That's absolutely where we're headed, which means what? Matt Beasler gets a start at center back. Maurice gets a start at center back.
I'd lean more towards Omar Gonzalez paired with Clarence Goodson, which is once again a brand new center back pairing.
But I'm not. I think you need a little bit more athleticism to make up for Omar.
Athleticism, yes, but if we learn anything from Honduras, there was no leadership. Where's the leadership on the back line? Clarence Goodson gives you a little bit of that experience. Maybe not leadership, but experience.
Let me let you guys know. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Who Are You Designs. WhoAreYouDesigns.com and use promo code BestSoccerShow15. You'll get 15% off your order over there. They've got an excellent Deuce face shirt that I might have to pick up for myself.
You said you wanted the DC United one.
I do. Well, it's a DC Flags inspired shirt. So, yeah, look, I'm going to rep a little bit. Why wouldn't I?
I don't know. There's no LA love on it.
There is an LA shirt in there. It's like our city, our love or something.
Oh, it is. You're right. Our city, our home. That's based on the Briggs song.
Yeah, so you'll have to go check that out. So make sure you guys go help support the show. Go to Who Are You Designs. Best Soccer Show 15 is your code. Look, Clint Dempsey is the captain. This is a little bit of a surprise. I think a lot of people were assuming that it was going to be Michael Bradley. He was the first choice. And I even threw out there Jermaine Jones because I thought Klinsmann would throw a curveball. But the curveball is Clint Dempsey. Are you okay with this?
It's funny. It was something we talked about with Grant Wahl, which you'll hear in the next segment here. And I agree that I think this is Jurgen Klinsmann playing a little bit of psychology through the armband. I think if everyone's being honest, everyone knows this is Michael Bradley's job to lose in the future. The problem is, when does the future start? When is the future now? Obviously, Jurgen Klinsmann feels that right now, I think that this is the goal of this is to bring the best out of Clint Dempsey. Clint Dempsey, a guy who goes in and out of games, kind of like Landon Donovan at the national team level. Clint Dempsey is in and out of games. If we don't see the consistency we saw with him and when he played for Fulham over the last few seasons, maybe that's partly Klinsmann's system and his style is not bringing him correctly into it. But I see this as a motivating factor for Clint. I don't necessarily see Clint as a natural leader, But if
what?
he's going to be the most experienced, maybe the best player on the team, I think this is Jurgen Klinsmann trying to get it out of him.
It might also be a little bit of protection for Clint Dempsey and to put it in his head that he's got to be smart about this because he's sitting on yellow card suspension. If he picks one up, he would miss the Mexico game. Same goes for Michael Bradley. I'm not sure about Jermaine Jones. I think there's one more name that I'm missing. So the yellow cards are an issue. Maybe that's part of it. You don't want to lose Clint Dempsey for Mexico, right? If you don't if you help it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll have Grant Wahl on all of these various issues. We'll get into the roster a little bit more, take some phone calls. Best Soccer Show, North American Soccer Network. Welcome back to the Best Soccer Show. Jason Davis, Jared Dubois, NASN.TV, joined on the line now by Sports Illustrated soccer writer Grant Wahl. How are you, Grant?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Not too bad. Let's start with the news that broke just before we got you on, a little bit before we got you on. Clint Dempsey named captain for these pair of qualifiers by Jurgen Klinsmann. It's a bit out of left field for me. Are you surprised by that choice?
I am a little surprised. I'm not surprised that Jurgen Klinsmann would do something we didn't expect, because that seems to be the one thing you can expect, whether it's lineups or choices like this. I thought Michael Bradley was a pretty clear choice on this one. And that's not a knock against Clint Dempsey. It's more of just noticing how Michael Bradley has come into his own at club level and with the national team. Michael Bradley's played 73 games for the U.S. national team over the years. He's playing very well in Italy right now. He seems to be much more of a natural leader than Dempsey is, but it does make me think back to a conversation I had a few days ago with a U.S. player, and I asked about who he thought was going to be named the captain, and he said Michael Bradley, slam dunk, but that wouldn't be my choice. I would choose Dempsey, and I found that interesting. I was like, why? And his theory was that giving Dempsey the armband would probably force him to think more in terms of the team than maybe he usually does. And that's certainly one way of looking at it. I guess I just kind of feel like your captain should be the one who pretty clearly to everyone should be the captain. And in this case, that seems like Michael Bradley, who's already been kind of passed over in the sense that when Tim Howard was named captain last month for Honduras and at Jamaica last year, I kind of thought Bradley should have been the guy. But maybe Klinsmann is challenging Bradley just as he did when Bradley couldn't get a start for the U.S. When Klinsmann first took over. I don't know. But I think this is a little bit surprising. I remember asking Dempsey back in 2010 if he was ever interested in being the captain, and he said, "Yeah, why not?" So we'll see.
Do you think that the captaincy, the armband, as a psychological tool, is a slippery slope?
I do think that, and this is not just in England where the captaincy is always taken with the utmost of seriousness. I think players take the captain's armband very seriously, whether they tell you or not. Back in the early days of Beckham in Los Angeles, when Beckham's people forced Landon Donovan to give up the armband so that Beckham could have it early on, that was a huge thing. That even when Landon spoke at USC in January, he mentioned that specifically as something that got him on the wrong path from the start with David Beckham, even though at the time he didn't even know that it was Beckham's people who were forcing the move. He just thought it was Lawless and Frank Yallop. But in any case, that showed to me what really goes on behind the scenes here is players do take the captain's armband seriously. So whenever people say, oh, you can be a leader without wearing the armband, I guess that's true. But I also think that don't underestimate how important the armband is to guys.
Grant, it's rare in U.S. soccer terms that something comes out that's a bigger news story than the roster these days. But the Brian Strauss piece comes out from Sporting News, and it's one of the biggest bombshells. I think this may be the the piece or the journalistic piece so far done on the U.S. national team that really. I don't remember a bombshell like this ever during the Arena tenure or the Bradley tenure. What effect do you think this is going to have just a few days out from this Costa Rica game? And can Klinsmann somehow turn this into a galvanizing tool?
I think it's possible because I think what it really comes down to is the results in the end. And while I do think it's pretty likely, I'm not in Denver right now, I think it's pretty likely that the U.S. national team has gone into bunker mode since the Sporting News piece came out. I think the range of possibilities for how we view Klinsmann next Wednesday is immense. When you look at if the U.S. loses both these games, there will be a big call for Jurgen Klinsmann to be fired. If the U.S. wins against Costa Rica and gets a result, or even wins at Mexico, people might be calling him a genius. Now, I understand this is a very results-driven business, so I think you have to keep that in mind. I also think it's actually likely that the U.S. will have more points than Mexico heading into the game at the Azteca. So you put all this stuff in perspective, play the game, and at the same time, the Strauss report had a real quantity and specificity of complaints, concerns from players about Klinsmann and his staff that are big picture concerns, I think, about not being tactically prepared to know what to do heading into a game. I don't have as big an issue with he doesn't give us the lineup until game day because Sir Alex Ferguson doesn't give the lineup for Manchester United's games until 2 hours before the game. And I think he's done just fine with that. So there's certain things in that piece that it's hard to know kind of a little bit what people really feel because you've got 11 players that were cited here, but all unnamed. So you don't know exactly who's doing the talking here. We have seen Tim Howard come out with Soccer by Ibis today and say specifically that he doesn't feel like there are divisions between the U.S.-born and German-born players. So he's putting his name on that. Carlos Bocanegra putting his name on his Facebook post last night, very sort of classy post that you might expect from a captain. But, big credit to Brian Strauss. It takes a lot of cojones to put out a story like that and to put in the work that he did. I believe him straight up when he says he talked to that number of players and that number of people connected to the team. Obviously, I wish there was more specificity on who was saying this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense that that Jurgen Klinsmann may have lost this team already, or he needs to go and bring them together. It doesn't seem to me, and Brian had quotes from Jurgen Klinsmann directly in this piece responding to some of these criticism. He doesn't seem bothered by it. This is almost like it's going as planned. He doesn't. We shouldn't worry about whether or not he's going to figure out how to put a tactical plan out there, because he doesn't really want to. Is that a fear for you?
I think it's a concern. I think your players need to know what's expected of them and asked of them when they take the field. And I don't want to put everything back to the 2008 Los Angeles Galaxy, but that's where I got in deepest with the team. And there are players that said about Ruud Gullit, like, we didn't know what we were being asked to do heading onto the field, that there wasn't enough communicated as far as a tactical game plan for all of that. And that's a real problem if that's indeed the case. And one of the big questions about Klinsmann coming into the U.S. job was who's going to be the tactical guy? If it's not Klinsmann, is it going to be Martin Vasquez? And is that the right guy? Because that didn't work out, that pairing atop Bayern Munich. And we've seen Philipp Lahm and other players say a lot of critical stuff about how they didn't have the gravitas to be listened to by the players there, especially Martin Vasquez. So I remember Ralph Honigstein wrote a column for SI.com the day Klinsmann was hired by the U.S. saying, okay, you've hired Klinsmann as your manager. Who's going to be the coach? And that's pretty straightforward question there. So I do think there are legitimate questions, and there have been from the start. Is Martin Vasquez really the guy to be in this position? There's questions a little bit about Jurgen Klinsmann. I think people are starting to ask, has he lost the locker room? Does the Emperor have any clothes?
Grant, you're in a unique position to kind of shed some light on this from a journalistic standpoint. Both you and Brian Strauss over the last couple of weeks have put out great stories regarding both MLS and U.S. men's national team using anonymous sources. Can you talk a little bit about the process and the choice to do so? And does it inherently attract perhaps those who have an axe to grind? Is that person more likely to cooperate with you as an anonymous source, and does that at all skew the data?
Well, anonymous sources are something that, as a journalist, I think Brian Strauss would tell you the same thing. You prefer not to use anonymous sources because it hurts a little bit the credibility of what you're putting out there. And I was really proud of the fact that all of the criticisms of Beckham and his people in my book came from people who put their name on those quotes, whether it was Landon Donovan or Alexi Lawless or Alan Gordon or whomever, Greg Banney. And I realized that was a different deal because that was a book. And, day-to-day, week-to-week journalism is a little bit different, obviously. And I think you have to be very careful when you give someone anonymity when that person is criticizing or ripping somebody. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a big difference for Brian Strauss that he had 11 players compared to 2 or 3 anonymous. The quantity of the players and their very specific things they're citing suggest that this is not someone just an isolated person with an axe to grind. But that's a conversation you always have to have with your editors about, how are we going to, is this good enough to run? Mm-hmm. I think in this case, this is just my opinion, is that Strauss had good enough stuff to run with.
Let's talk about a hypothetical here. And in the light of Brian's report and the divisions and the issues that came to light through it, if Jurgen Klinsmann doesn't get the requisite number of points, or if they lose both games and get 0 points out of Costa Rica and Mexico, number one, does U.S. Soccer consider firing him? And number two, if they did, who would be the natural replacement?
Well, it's a great question, because I think a lot of what this comes down to is I don't think Sunil Gulati is going to fire Jurgen Klinsmann at all. I just don't.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there would be so much public pressure if the U.S. got 0 points out of these 2 games, but I doubt it.
Wouldn't that be something in the modern American soccer world?
Isn't that hubris, though, Grant? Isn't that the ultimate version of hubris, that he can't take himself out of it, or maybe to swallow his pride to make a move?
Well, there's a few elements involved here.
Money.
I mean, I've had Sunil tell me before that the lack of, not the lack, but the lower amount of media coverage in the U.S. does have an impact on his calculus on whether he does something. That, and we were talking about it in terms of England not voting for Sepp Blatter and abstaining in the FIFA presidential election a couple of years ago. And I asked him, why did the U.S. vote for him? And there were a lot of reasons he said why the U.S. did vote for Blatter, who was the only candidate. But he took into account the fact that he wasn't going to get just totally destroyed all over every newspaper in America if he did it. Now, if somehow we got President Obama over in Israel to start taking shots at Jurgen Klinsmann if the U.S. doesn't do well this week, then maybe that changes things. I don't see that happening, obviously. So the other thing, you got to keep a couple things in mind here. Sunil Gulati pursued Jurgen Klinsmann for years and years. Right. So he put a lot into that. My apologies for my dog Zizu barking, by the way.
He doesn't like Klinsmann's.
And then, he finally gets him, and U.S. Soccer is now paying Jurgen Klinsmann $2.5 million a year, about 4 times what Bob Bradley was getting. And so that's guaranteed through the end of 2014. So that's a huge chunk of change. Right. And also keep in mind that the obvious replacement would be Bruce Arena. And right now, Bruce Arena is a guy who has totally restored himself as the greatest coach, the greatest American coach in U.S. soccer history with what he's done in L.A. the last couple of years to make us remember all of his achievements as the U.S. coach. But when he essentially was let go by Sunil Gulati in 2006, Bruce Arena burned some bridges publicly there. Called Sunil Gulati a micromanager, called him a few other things too, I recall, because it was my interview. And I do remember that, and I know Sunil Gulati remembers that. I have a hard time imagining Sunil Gulati hiring Bruce Arena. I just do at this point.
All right. So with all of this turmoil surrounding the team, with this news story, with obviously the captaincy being in question now, I know with Clint Dempsey, with all of the injuries and the issues in the back, what do you make of these 2 games? Let's focus on Costa Rica. I think that's the most important game. How do you think they do? Do they come out with the 3 points they need?
I think it's possible. And I think it's possible to likely that the U.S. gets 3 points out of this game. Don't underestimate the home field advantage here that the U.S. is going to have. The tickets sold out in like a minute, basically, because they had already done the pre-sale. And so this is going to be, I would guess, a very pro-U.S. crowd in conditions that maybe a few more of the U.S. players have played in recently, maybe not. And I think there's a lot of pressure on this game, and there are some leaders on this U.S. team. I think this is a game that's really important for Michael Bradley and Clint Dempsey and Brad Guzan, who, even though he hasn't played that many games for the U.S., is one of the older guys who has experience in a very good league. So I think this Friday game against Costa Rica is a lot more important to the U.S. than the Tuesday game at Mexico, because I think it's realistic to think the U.S. is, based on history, not going to get any points down there, and whatever they do get will be a bonus.
Wouldn't that be the greatest story, though? After all of this, if they go to Azteca and get a result somehow, wouldn't that be amazing? Got Grant Wahl, Sports Illustrated soccer writer, joining us, talk a little bit of national team. Thanks a lot for your time, Grant. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Jason and Jared back on the Best Soccer Show. Thanks to Grant Wahl for giving us his insight. I think there are a couple of points there, Jared. Sunil Gulati admitting that the lack of pressure from the press in this country keeps him from doing things he might not or keeps him from making decisions he might otherwise make.
It would be fair to say then it allows him to be selfish in his decision making?
I think, well, certainly for the Sepp Blatter situation,
because it's easier for him to say, "Okay, Sepp." It's easier for him to say, "Here's our vote, Sepp," and hope for things in return. And that's not like the small media that the U.S. soccer has in this country did call him out, but is the wave of the media big enough to impact anything? I think Grant Wahl's right when he says no. And
bringing it back to Jurgen Klinsmann, if there were calls for Jurgen Klinsmann to be fired, would there be enough pressure on Sino Galati for him to make that decision? He seems tied to Jurgen Klinsmann. It's his guy. He went and chased him down. So is there any chance that if those two games don't go the way that they're supposed to, certainly the first one, that he would consider firing Jurgen Klinsmann? It's on us. It's on newspapers. It's on radio. It's on. And is there enough of that?
I think Gulati has a convenient excuse that he can hide behind the salary he chose to pay Jurgen Klinsmann as the reason not to fire him.
That's not going to fly for those of us who are interested in this team making it to Brazil.
But like we said, the media pressure isn't big enough to even care. What does he care what you and I think?
No, I realize that. It needs to be on SportsCenter. It needs to be on talk radio. It needs to be everywhere else. There's a nice quote here that Steve Goff of the Washington Post got from Michael Bradley in regards to the story Brian Strauss put up at Sporting News on Tuesday. Or yesterday. It says, "Shameful, embarrassing. You cross a line when you take your disappointment outside the inner circle." That is exactly the response I would expect.
I'll tell you right now, that's a captain statement.
That's a captain quote. That's a captain quote right there. Michael Bradley just made a captain quote. And you wonder how that will impact things in the locker room. They've been training. It's obviously come up. These guys have talked about it already.
I'm sure they're talking about it amongst themselves, but I still go back to what I said in our first segment. I don't know that Jurgen Klinsmann thinks of it important enough that he needs to come down to their level to discuss this with them.
I hope he does. I hope everybody.
I hope so too.
I hope they sat around at breakfast or wherever. They had a meeting and they said, "All right, guys, this thing is out there. We need to address it." And it shouldn't. There shouldn't be a call for people to identify themselves if they said anything. That's not necessary. Mm-hmm. I don't think you need to pin down who said what. It's just a matter of, okay, we've got to address these issues.
See, that's the good thing about having 24 different lineups over 24 games. He's had so many dang people in the pool that it could be 11 people that aren't even there this week.
That's exactly it. And you were throwing around some names during the break, and we can't decide if it's irresponsible for us to take guesses. We can't even decide that. Like, should we?
I know.
Oh, here's the guy that I think definitely.
I definitely have people that I think may be the ones, but I just don't know if we should have that discussion or not.
I'm pretty sure everybody's got it in their heads. I'm pretty sure. We're going to have to see how things go the day of the game. Best Soccer Show will be here with your pregame, halftime, and postgame coverage, as we always are, on NASN.TV. So make sure you're looking out for that, Stitcher, and tune in, and all those places. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get a little bit more into this roster. Bruce Arena came up in that interview. We'll talk about him. Best Soccer Show, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Jason Davis, Jared Dubois back on the Best Soccer Show, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. I just had a thought. I don't know I don't know how long he'll be captain, but you got to put Deuce on a T-shirt with the word somehow mix in the captain thing, right? Captain Deuce. Does that work? That doesn't work. Captain Clint.
If Harks is captain for life, couldn't he just be captain for a game? Like he's not. It's not the long term solution.
Yeah, I don't think that works on a T-shirt for Who Are You Designs, but yeah, make sure you guys go to Who Are You Designs. Use Best Soccer Show 15 as your code. Get 15% off. All right, yeah, we do a Generalissimo T-shirt from Michael Bradley would be excellent. That's a good suggestion from producer Trevor. That is what he's called in Italy these days at Roma. Let's go back to the phone lines. 201-430-2378 is our phone number. Excuse me. We've got a call from area code 541. Who's this?
Hey, Jason, it's Casey. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure. What's up, Casey?
I read that article with Strauss, and it seems like Jurgen Klinsmann is surrounding his coaching staff with a bunch of yes men. And it said that at halftime, all he was doing was, come on, we got to win this game and stuff. I don't think they're working on tactical awareness, and he doesn't have a coach on his staff that can come at halftime and tell him to change things up and stuff. Maybe he needs to hire like a Tab Ramos or someone, to get the technical awareness better and stuff instead of doing all these conditioning and yoga stuff. He needs to get more technical.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for the call, Casey. Look, that's one of the things that came out of Strauss's piece, Jared, is that, at halftime, there's no tactical plan to start the game. And then at halftime, instead of making adjustments based on what's gone wrong or right, Klinsmann's just saying, all right, guys, let's go out there and do it for the, yeah.
Listen, anybody who has a boss at work, I mean, you must feel my pain because I get that thing all the time, whereas we need the numbers to be better. Okay, tell me how to do it.
Right.
Tell me how to do it. I understand that's your expectation. I understand that's where you want me to go. Right. So how do I get there?
Here's one of the questions that I have coming out of this. Okay, and I think a lot of certainly people who were paying attention to Germany with Klinsmann and Yogi Löw and were when Klinsmann got hired, kind of paying attention to his past reputation. I think a lot of those people knew that maybe Klinsmann doesn't have the tactical understanding that is required of the job, and there might be some issues there, and they needed a strong number two. So the question is, does Jurgen Klinsmann, he flat out doesn't know how to do it, and that's why he's not giving them a plan, that's why he's not changing things at halftime, or is this part of his grand scheme to push them out of the nest and see if they'll fly?
Well, I think if you remember back in when we were doing one of our shows, back when this actually went down, when he was hired, I think you and I both said, listen, maybe you do bring Klinsmann in and you bring him in as a technical director and you bring someone like a Bielsa in that's going to be more the tactician as a coach. There was that conversation.
If they bring Bielsa.
Well, we talked about it back then. I mean, this is how far back this was.
I know. I think we're all intrigued by the idea of Marcelo Bielsa being at the head of the national team, but come on.
It'd be like Chalice at Chivas. I mean, do you imagine the quotes?
Well, the quotes and just his particular brand of soccer.
But we talked about before, Klinsmann may be best at a higher. Like we talked about Peter Vermees on our show over the weekend. Is Peter Vermees getting in his own way as a coach when he's probably better suited to be the guy pulling the strings behind the scenes?
And those questions are certainly pertinent, and we'll have to see what happens on Friday and then on Tuesday, and whether or not those questions stay in the realm of thought, or of discussion, or if we move on to something else because they managed to get the results we think they need, which at this point 3 points is an absolute must for me. I mean I've seen people say, okay, 2 points you can get by because it gets a lot easier from here, but I got to have 3 points. And that obviously.
Well, if I think about what I'm worried about with this team is leaking of goals because the defense is so quote unquote weak or inexperienced together. So what I'm actually kind of buoyed by is the fact that the offensive players that Klinsmann called in, he got it right. And these guys are in form right now.
Remember when I said on the Sunday show that I thought that this team picked itself? I was obviously wrong in the defensive area by miles and miles because of injuries or whatever. But this forward core, it picked itself. It absolutely picked itself. There would be no excuse for not taking Jazzy out the door. There'd be no excuse for not taking Clint Dempsey. There'd be no excuse for not taking Hercules Gomez. Same goes for Terrence Boyd. So you have to be encouraged, at least offensively, by that group of guys.
And mostly because if the U.S. is going to get any points out of either of these two games, they have to outscore the opponent because they're going to leak some goals. The U.S. is probably going to give up some goals here. So you need to have a couple horses out there that can maybe pull 2 or 3 goals in. But the problem is Jurgen Klinsmann in qualifiers is yet to be able to show that he can make this team create goals. Now, the guys are there and the guys are doing it at the club level. If they can pull together a 2-goal game, a 3-goal game, I think the U.S. has a chance of pulling some points out of these games.
Isn't the key, though, the midfield, not necessarily the forwards? I mean, okay, Josie Altidore hasn't done it on the national team level, and we're still waiting for that to bear some fruit. But, certainly he's capable of scoring goals. And the same goes with Herc. And
you know what? Credit to Klinsmann on this one. There's actually wingers in this roster. You have Breck Shea. I mean, you could say maybe Graham Zusi can play as a winger as well. Do they need to put Eddie Johnson on the left wing on this game when you have DeMarcus Beasley and you have Breck Shea?
Yeah, let's say, I mean, in terms of classic feet on the chalk kind of wingers, that's not necessarily
more than they've had any time over the recent past.
If we're talking about an improvement over zero width, this is some width, and I think we can all kind of at least be a little satisfied that there's something else working there. I mean, how many classic wingers are in the American pool anyway? How many guys are going to be just hanging out there whipping crosses in
Brad
all day?
Davis, the guy they brought in as later on,
and 24th member of the and I don't expect Brad Davis to get on the field. I don't really quite understand that call up, to be honest with you. I don't expect
especially when you already have 2 other really true left-sided players in DeMarcus Beasley and Breck Shea. So it's kind of odd to bring in Brad Davis there. But listen, I get it. But at least in this circumstance, Jurgen Klinsmann has the option to put width on the field. Now, whether he chooses to put Jermaine Jones on the right again and really lose all that opportunity or not is going to be up to him. But the players are there, and I think maybe you see a Michael Bradley, Jermaine Jones pairing in the center, and you put either a Breck Shea or DeMarcus Beasley on the left, you put a Graham Zusi on the right, and I think that's a decent midfield for both creating chances and establishing some width.
Seems like Michael Bradley is making a statement in Denver as we speak, as we do the show, seeing tweets that he is the one most critical of the whistleblowers in the camp that decided to talk to Brian Strauss and let loose with their dissatisfaction with Jurgen Klinsmann. So I have to see what kind of fallout there is from that. Now, he's not the captain, and I'm okay with Michael Bradley saying some things and sounding like a captain up to a point, but if he continues to rock the boat, if he's making big boisterous statements about how these guys are cowards and stuff like that, then it becomes an issue.
We can't have it both ways, though. We can't say that there's no leaders in this team and then knock a guy down a peg when he tries to be one.
But exactly the thing that he's talking about, how you keep it in the inner circle and you don't take it outside. Him admonishing those guys for doing that should happen in the inner circle. It shouldn't happen on the outside. He shouldn't be going to the press and saying, these guys need to man up and not take it, blah, blah. He doesn't need to do that. He needs to sit them all down in a room. Area code 818, who's this?
This is Tony.
What's up, Tony?
Hey, I was just wondering, by the call-in of Brad Davis, do you think that could be a sign that either Breck Shea's foot or he's not performing well enough, or that either they're going to start Beasley at left back, so they're maybe looking for a little bit more depth, on the wing?
That's certainly possible. I mean, the Beasley left back thing has come up before. I don't think anybody's supremely comfortable with it, Jared, but it's certainly a possibility. And I guess you could argue that Brad Davis being in the camp is some depth on the left side of midfield.
Well, going into a Costa Rica game, I think maybe you do take the experiment of Beasley at left back because you need to dictate the pace. You need to put Costa Rica on their heels, and you need to create some offense. And DeMarcus Beasley gives you more of an opportunity to do that than a Justin Morrow, who I know had a goal over the weekend, so everyone's going to say he can play offense. But I think it's a bit of an aberration there. If you want some offense and you want some speed to try to dictate the pace to Costa Rica, I think DeMarcus Beasley's the better option between he and Justin Morrow.
Okay, but Brian Ruiz is still playing for Costa Rica, right?
Yes, he is.
He does play on the right side of Costa Rica's formation. Do you really want him going up against DeMarcus Beasley?
If you can make Brian Ruiz play defense by having DeMarcus Beasley in there, then that's a good maybe a good tactic.
I would hope that the United States has more of the ball and that becomes something they can pressure Brian Ruiz. But if he does find himself in space with DeMarcus Beasley between him and the goal, I'm not sure anybody feels supremely comfortable with that. Let's note that Costa Rica's got an injury issue as well. Alvaro Saborío is out with a foot injury, knee injury, And this, I don't know what the ramifications are, but that goes further to
and that's kind of a leaked report, and maybe this could be a little bit of gamesmanship, in between two coaches. We don't know for sure if how true that story is, if it's he's actually out, or if it's something that he's just struggling with, or if it's just something to put Jurgen Klinsmann on his toes. But if that is the case, and if that's true, that's a huge bit of luck on the US side that's really struggling to find any at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the words of a former U.S. men's national team head coach, the man that Grant Wahl mentioned might have burned some bridges with U.S. soccer when
Bruce Arena burning bridges. I don't believe you.
Never happens. No. Bruce Arena talked to Doug McIntyre of ESPN the magazine for an article that's coming up soon, but we've got the answers to some questions online here, Jared. And we talked about this briefly before. This is Bruce Arena saying that Americans born in America should be playing in the national team. We wondered if there might be some additional context. This is what we've got. He says, how closely do you follow the national team? Bruce says, not as closely as I used to. I don't even know some of the players, which is odd as the former coach. Players on the national team should be, and this is my own feeling, they should be Americans. They're all born in other countries. I don't think we can say we are making progress. If they are all born in other countries, I don't think we can say, which is, that's what we heard before. Does it change anything at all?
I think Bruce Arena's looking internally when he gets asked that question. I think his answer to that question means we're not building the players we need to build if we're having to go to Germany.
You know what I think it is? I think Bruce Arena is an MLS guy. Okay, yep. And in this interview, he also defends MLS. He says if you're American, wait, hold on, let me find the quote because I don't want to get this wrong. What do you say about people who watch the English Premier League but don't think MLS is worth their time? I say they're pretty stupid. MLS is like any league. There are good games and bad games. If someone would rather watch Barcelona than an MLS game, I'd probably agree. But our league has grown substantially and many people enjoy it. Our biggest problem is that we continually beat down on ourselves. Bruce Arena is an MLS backer. I mean, he's a coach in the league. He grew up as a coach in this league. He understands this league. He sees talent in this league. So what I think he's saying is that why are you going to Germany to find these guys when you've got talented players in MLS that could step in right now? I think I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying that's where that's coming from Bruce Arena.
I think that's legit. I think when you think about all the things he says in this, that's probably one of the least scathing things. But one of the things that I wanted to point to in this interview is when he asks point blank, McIntyre asks him about Jurgen Klinsmann, give his take on it. And he says that he doesn't want to state it publicly, and he doesn't think it's his place to necessarily evaluate another coach. But listen, if you had good things to say, you would say them.
No, look, that's probably true. It is by not saying something, he is kind of being negative, but I think a hands-off approach is the right move for Bruce Arena, and I can't fault him for that. Area code 626, who's this? Mark, I can barely hear you. Are you holding your hand over the phone? What's going on? Are you in a trunk right now? Mark, do you need help?
No, I'll take you off speaker. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
All right. With the Bruce Arena thing, I don't think that's a really big idea. Well, I think he may not have phrased it all too well. But
come on. No, wait. Let me
saying that those kids aren't Americans.
Okay.
But rather, they're just not developed here. And are we really improving if we have to go outside of our country to bring in, players that were developed in other countries? I'm not sure it's necessarily where they're born or not. So I wouldn't look too much into that.
I think you're right for the most part. But at the same time, Bruce Arena says exactly what he means at all times. Let's not.
I think Bruce Arena knows exactly what he's saying most of the time. But listen, it's a big badge on the lapel of Bruce Arena that he made the quarterfinals of the World Cup with guys of collegiate background. I mean, he took guys that were college products, turned them into good professionals, international players, and had success with them. I think he wears that as a badge of honor. So it's a different direction than what Jurgen Klinsmann is doing. But while we're talking about Bruce Arena, and obviously that means LA Galaxy, Dave Denholm from Talk Soccer on Twitter said, would you take the Galaxy back four as a U.S. national team back four?
I saw that.
And I don't know about the Mexico game, but in Costa Rica, where you're playing against MLS talent offense, wouldn't you feel more comfortable with the back four of LA Galaxy versus what you're seeing right now?
Look, I thought Todd Dunovit deserved a look. I mean, I could argue that Todd Dunovit's better suited for either one of these games than Justin Morrow is. I guess I probably would for Costa Rica. Although I think the lack of Jeff Cameron would bother me a little bit. I do like him being in there.
I think that's a good point, but I'm just talking about in terms of we're pushing the panic button in terms of defense. We're throwing stuff against the wall and see if it's going to stick here against Costa Rica. Sure. You could bring 4 Americans that play together week in, week out, and the best defense in MLS.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we got responses from Michael Bradley. The full responses per Brian Strauss on Twitter. We'll get to those. Best Soccer Show, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Jason and Jared back to close out the Best Soccer Show, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. It's all about the build-up to USA-Costa Rica. We will be live on the air pre-game, half hour before before the game starts, or whatever. I don't know. Do we need a half hour? Possibly more. Okay, just pay attention to your Twitter accounts. Look for it. We'll put the schedule up. The game kicks off at 10 o'clock Eastern, or shortly after 10 o'clock Eastern. We'll probably be on the air at 9:30 Eastern. That's
a safe bet.
Yeah, we'll be here for halftime. We'll definitely be back after the game to wrap everything up and get thoughts of the listeners. Phone lines are still open, 201-430-2378 as we get ready to close this out. But we've got these responses from Michael Bradley, Jared, talking to the press in Denver. It's long. A lot of it is, basically, hey, these guys need to shut their mouths and do their jobs. And what's your favorite part? Give me your favorite part.
My favorite part is when he talks about guys having the balls to say things in front of the team and in front of each other and not going around their backs and doing it in the press. So if these guys felt like there was a culture of being willing to hear players' thoughts, they may have done it. Maybe there's not a culture of being of Jurgen Klinsmann wanting feedback. Maybe he doesn't want feedback. It's one-way direction. But I dig that Michael Bradley's going out there and saying that he's going to be the guy, the catalyst to bring this team together. Call out the detractors and let's get together for this game. I think someone had to do it.
Yeah, it's like you said, this is captain speak, and I worried about making it too disruptive if if he's putting guys down or whatever. I mean, he says he's not going to talk to anybody. He basically said, all right, look, here's my feelings on it. It's wrong. You shouldn't do it. But now we've just got to get ourselves together and go play a game.
Well, here's another take on it. How come this dropped 24 hours ago, all right, more than that, and there's been plenty of reporters and press conferences since then, including one announcing Clint Dempsey as captain. Where's Clint Dempsey's quote about this. If he's the captain, where's his take on this? How come we're talking about Michael Bradley's take?
Interesting. So you require Deuce to step up and speak because he's been named captain. Where are you, Clint?
Maybe is he a kind of leader in the locker room? Maybe not in the press. Maybe that's his style. I don't know what his style is, but I like this. I respond to this. What Michael Bradley's saying.
Look, this is exactly the kind of thing that made people say Michael Bradley should get the armband in the first place. This is what this is all about. But you heard from Grant Wahl. He said he talked to one. Now it's one player. It's not everybody. Talked to one player who said I'd give it to Clint. And hey, there it is. Now it's time to show something. Now it's time to live up to it.
I hope that Michael Bradley comes out or something later. We find out he's like vice captain or something like that, and like they're grooming him for it, and letting him say, "Hey, be the guy that's in the press," and maybe Clint Dempsey be the guy in the locker room.
Sure. I'm more worried about getting the victory. I mean, the captaincy.
But this is part of it to me. You got to get everyone on the same page. If someone's not out there putting this behind them and looking forward, then they're not going to be it's not going to be a good game.
Okay. All right. We got a couple of emails here. Do you want to transition a hard left turn into our email pool here? We got a couple of minutes. You ready for this? Okay.
Let's do it.
You don't seem enthused. I don't want to do it. No, I'm kidding.
No.
All right. Let's get to it. This one, first one's from Clifford. He talks about Saturday, waking up, plop down on the couch, watch MLS. Hope we can see a bigger transition to more back-to-back games available on cable networks for my viewing pleasure. He didn't catch the breakaway show. He's crossing his fingers. It'll make more appearances. What seems to be missing is a touchstone where fans of the league can go back and digest all the weekend's action and get set up for upcoming matchups.
I don't think that's missing. If you go to MLSsoccer.com, you can watch a highlight of every game.
What he's saying is one self-contained show, half hour, an hour, all the highlights. The NFL gets 1,000 hours of this stuff. We can't get 1 hour for MLS. I mean, I know. Look, we're not the NFL. MLS is not the NFL, but come on.
Yeah, I think he also says that he thinks that NBC being the most likely candidate, and I think that's probably correct. I think, if anything, NBC Sports is slowly rolling out bigger and bigger ideas that satisfy the needs of the U.S. soccer fan base, and specifically MLS fan base. But you can't expect a big network that's finding its feet to put everything out there at once.
Okay. Next email is from Benjamin Barry, Benji in East Texas. He says, first of all, he gave us a lot of very nice compliments, said he likes the show, and then he said he didn't like the fashion talk, which I'm sorry. Come on, Benji. Look,
not going anywhere, Ben. It's not going anywhere.
In the sweater vest.
It's just going to happen. I'm sorry. It's one of those things that interest us. I'm not even that big of a fashion guy. I mean, I try to look good or whatever. I'm not Jared. I don't own cardigans. I'm not putting it all together in an ensemble.
I'm not gonna lie. I wore a nice Hugo Boss shirt to work today. I mean, right now I'm rocking Mr. T, but so I can be sensitive and casual as well.
Let's say this: I find it fascinating the evolution of MLS because when this league started 17 years ago, you weren't getting coaches dressed up in three-piece suits. You weren't getting guys. Even I know styles have changed, but there were no Benny Olsons, there were no Jay Heaps. There were, I mean. Not that I can remember. There may have been one, a random one every now and then.
I think the foreign guys would do it. Octavio Zambrano, he would rock a suit. I think the foreign guys would do it.
But we're talking about the American guys, right? We're talking about, I mean, does Bruce Arena still wears a turtleneck and a sport coat? That's still Bruce's go-to.
Oh, man. It's not even a tactile neck. It's a turtleneck.
It's not even a tactile neck. Yeah. Pick your poison from Colin, which is already dated. He says, Captain Edition, Michael Bradley, Jermaine Jones. I'm sorry, it's Clint Dempsey. You're none of the above is the answer to that question. None of the above. Last email from Bill. He talks about the Sporting News article. He says, echoes many of my own feelings about Klinsmann in that he is a motivational guy who doesn't have tactical skills really to really do the job. If you read all of his quotes, he repeatedly says everything takes time. That's true, but he's had over a year and a half with a dozen games, some of which counted, some didn't. He has shown no improvement or correction in areas that were obviously issues. Locker room stuff is troubling, and we haven't really touched on the locker room stuff, Jared. The divisions that were mentioned between the German Americans and the other guys, and whether or not
which I think is natural, though, isn't it? I think that's natural if you have different cultural touchstones that you're going to basically come from. There, everyone brings something with them to the locker room, and these guys are bringing something completely different.
Hey, look, there are going to be cliques. Every group dynamic has cliques. The issue is breaking them down so that they don't become overwhelming. They don't define your locker room. You might have them. They might still exist, but they're not. I mean, but people should be able to bounce between them, right?
You know, it's funny. When I think about other international teams and other national teams, do you really think of anyone that has big language barriers like this?
France has some clicks. I don't know about language barriers, but they have some clicks for sure.
I think language barrier is a powerful thing. Language barrier is a very, very powerful thing.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a major factor in all of this. You mentioned a guy you thought may be able to bridge that gap.
Yeah. I think Terrence Boyd, and I thought that it was really good that in Brian Strauss's piece, there was a segment where he said, aside from Terrence Boyd, there is a issue between the Germans and the Americans. And that speaks exactly to what I feel resonates when I watch Terrence Boyd and when I read what he has to say, because I feel he does bridge that gap between the two, and I think he could be a very important player in that locker room in terms of who's going to bridge the gap.
I mean, maybe he could. I don't know if it's that it's not that big of a deal to make it. Oh, he can bridge the gap and save this team. I don't think it rises to that level. It's just maybe he can help some guys mix around a little bit more. I just think Terrence Boyd is like the happiest go luckiest guy on the planet. He's
the happiest puppy in the room. You know, like
loves playing soccer. He loves his Americanness. He obviously loves his Germanness. He's just a guy that goes out and does his thing and does, it doesn't care about it.
I want good things for him. I really want good things for Terrence Boyd.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm not. Are you backing him to start against Costa Rica or Mexico?
You know, it's funny. If you think about the tandems up front and the four people in midfield I listed out there, I didn't put Clint Dempsey in there. So I don't know. Maybe you do put Clint Dempsey on the left instead of someone like a Breck Shea that has only been getting substitute minutes. But that means you pull one of your more powerful options over to the wing. And also the thing is Dempsey ready to go 90?
Yeah, well,
he's coming off an injury.
Yeah, well, coming off injury, and I heard something about a birth of a child, so I don't know. We're rushing to get out of here. Make sure you hit up iTunes, ratings and reviews. We're going to be back on Friday with our match coverage, USA-Costa Rica. Go check out Who Are You Designs. Use Best Soccer Show 15. Get 15% off of a T-shirt over there. We'll be giving you guys updates on some excellent new things happening for us. Anything else, Mr. Dubois? We got to go.
That's it, man.
All right. We'll talk to you guys on Friday. Bye.
Your best.